Raise your hand if you know where Eakly is. A lot more hands are going up now. You probably know because of Mike Moore. He played at Oral Roberts from 1979 to 81. He was an All-American that year. The Seattle Mariners drafted him with the first pick in the first round. He made his Major League debut in 1982, wound up playing on a handful of teams, and over his long career, he is probably most remembered for 1989 when the Oakland A swept the San Francisco Giants in the World Series, and Mike Moore won 2 of those 4 games for the Oakland A's. He also made the All-Star game that year where he struck out Tony Gwynn, finished 3rd in Cy Young Award winning. And of all the young people who have pitched out of Oklahoma, no one has struck out more major leaguers than Mike Moore. Mike, welcome.
You know, it's always an honor. We coach or we play or we do what we do not to be inducted into Hall of Fames, but obviously it's a great honor, and especially being from the state of Oklahoma and being honored among your peers and fellow athletes that either coached or have grown up here, have played here. Really, it's an honor that's really indescribable, but you're just blessed to be here, and when people have supported you along the way or here, believe me, it's an honor, and so thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Only 2 of this year's inductees played against each other. So, Mike, how did you pitch to Mickey Tettleton?
Did I face you in the All-State game? We were on the same team in the All-State game, right?
Yeah, the first time I faced you was at Ted Reynolds Stadium back in Legion Ball. And I remember this because I remember when I first saw Mike pitch, it was the first real power arm that I ever saw, and I thought, man, this is going to get really hard for me. But we faced each other a number of times in Detroit. He got some pine tar balls back, but he kind of got into my kitchen a little bit. But then we were fortunate enough to play together in Detroit for a couple of years.
Mike, Eakly, Oklahoma, all the way to the World Series. That's got to be a mind-boggling experience over the years.
You're telling me. It was, growing up, I grew up on a peanut farm, and, even in those days, there was just the game of the week. Baseball now is sensationalized. You can't turn on the TV in the summertime without seeing a baseball game somewhere. But, my memories of growing up were, really, I wasn't a baseball fan, except I was a Johnny Bench fan. Johnny was the same age as my oldest brother, so I was a wee little lad when he was at Binger, and I remember watching him play high school baseball. So I would go in and watch Johnny play on the game of the week because the Reds were on a lot, but if he wasn't on, I really didn't care a whole lot about it. Baseball was just kind of what we did. We played sports. We played fall baseball, we played basketball in between them, which was actually my first love, I'll have to admit. But I figured out I could throw a baseball 100 miles an hour, that maybe basketball wasn't the thing I should go for. But that's just kind of what we did. And eventually from Oral Roberts, I ended up 2 months in AA and then in the big leagues. And it's just kind of what you do. You try to figure out where you fit in and how good you really are. And I was blessed to be able to do it for 14 years.
Mike, all those years in the major leagues, what hitter did you fear most?
That's an easy answer. Most people won't even remember his name. Doug DeCinces. I think he hit 250 for his career, but I can remember, I think it was my 7th year in the big leagues. This is an unheard of these days, but I threw 11 innings in a game in Seattle. I got a no decision. He went 0 for 5 off of me, and I got him down to 500 career off of him. So after that, he went to Japan. I guess he figured he couldn't hit me, so he'd just leave the country.
Yeah, you mentioned how starting pitchers today don't pitch nearly as many complete games. You had 79 complete games and 16 shutouts as a major league pitcher. That's
Thank you. We were, it's kind of interesting. I was telling somebody earlier, I was just a couple of weeks ago with Goose Gossage and Dave Stewart, who was obviously our ace in Oakland when I was there, and we were just having this conversation about openers and games, and how people are going to sustain this. It's a different world now, because that was my job. And, you know, like you just said, when it was my day, I took the ball and I expected to go 9 innings. And I think now we're looking at a little bit different philosophy. I'm sure Mickey's got some thoughts on this too. But, you know, you see starting pitchers now looking up to see their pitch count in the 5th inning because they wanted to get out of the game with 100 pitches. And that's just not a world that I understand as when I was playing baseball. And, you know, maybe you just call me an old school guy, but I think eventually it's going to have to come back to that period, because you can't sustain not having three starting pitchers at least that can get you to the 6th or 7th inning to hold your bullpen so you can maintain that through a 162-game schedule. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the game continually evolves, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes from now, because I don't believe it can sustain the way it is right now.
Mike, you pitched for a lot of great baseball managers. Tell us what your memories are of the managers that you played for and what you learned from them.
Well, with Sparky, which was interesting, you know, when Mickey was talking about that little story. Sparky was different. He didn't have the name of Captain Hook for no reason. I mean, when he came to the mound, he put out his hand. He said, "Don't say a word. You can put it in there as hard as you want to, but don't say a word, and just go to the dugout." So that was a little different, you know, and that was later in my career. I'd been around a little bit, but you know, the best manager, and a lot of people, some people argue with this, a lot of people will agree with me. I played for Tony La Russa for 4 years in Oakland. And Tony, some people say he ruined the game because he started all this left-right matchups, you know, with the specialty relievers. But he was always, when I played with him, he was always one step ahead of the game. And when I say that, and you know, Mickey may or may not know this, but you know, let's just say I threw a complete game the night before, and it was kind of your dig me day in the outfield. The next day for batting practice, you did all your work and you got everything done. Well, here with Tony would come walking around with his fungo. And he'd say, "You know what, you're pretty good last night, but you know, your next start's against Kansas City, and you're really good against those guys. But I'm going to hold you to 7 innings or 100 pitches because I want to bring you back a day early against the Texas Rangers because you're really good against those guys." And that he was the first manager that I knew of that was that forward thinking in the game, because when we left spring training, Dave Stewart, Bob Welch, and myself, we knew every day we were pitching for the first 2 months of the season. It didn't matter what happened with the weather, if there were rainouts, but we knew we were going to get the ball. And then he fit all the puzzles together, and you know, there was always a reason for what he did, and you didn't always know, because I remember my second start in Oakland. I come off the mound in Anaheim, and I'm throwing a 3-hit shutout. I'm throwing about 85 pitches, and Tony takes the ball from me. He said, "Hey, Eck needs an inning of work." And you know, and I want to say, you know, he's talking about Dennis Eckersley, who's obviously one of the greatest relievers ever, and I want to say, you know how hard it is to do what I'm doing right now. But, you know, there was a reason. So Eck needed an inning work. Well, later in the year, we're trying to wrap up the division against the Twins, who are our biggest rival that year. And I come off the mound after the 8th inning. I'm pitching the opening game of the series. I'm winning 1-0, and I'm sitting in the dugout and kind of talking to Dave Duncan, and we're kind of doing, you know, what you do between innings. And I look down there, and Dennis Eckersley's sitting down in the bullpen. And I'm thinking, this guy's making $3 million a year. I've done my job getting him in here. And Tony just looks at me and says, "Go out and finish it." So I go out, but he always knew, and he's the first manager I ever played for, and I think he was on the edge of the game, that he always knew in advance, and he always knew the matchups. He always knew everything down the road. He was that well prepared, and usually he was right, so you couldn't argue with him. So it was quite the learning experience after playing baseball your whole life to be able to be around a baseball mind like that. Well, that's an interesting question. I was the first one in my family to go to college, and you know, I'd never really dreamed about it. I was the youngest of 5 kids, and you know, and it was kind of interesting that you know, Coach Ward was recruiting me at Oklahoma State. I was getting, you know, Coach Seymour at Oklahoma, and I thought I'd always want to go to Oklahoma, and they offered me full rides, but there was a man by the name of Larry Koshel at Oral Roberts that was very interested in me, and you know, there was just something attracting coming out of Eakly. Not only, probably at the time, they probably had the nicest baseball stadium in the country for collegiate baseball when I went there after graduating in 1978. But they'd just been to the College World Series, and obviously the talent level was good there. So really, to answer your question, Larry Koshel was why I ended up there. It was not that he hounded me, but there was something about him at the time. And you know, what do I know? I don't know, come here from Sikkim, coming out of Eakly, but I liked this man. And, you know, and he obviously convinced me that Oral Roberts was the place for me. With, you know, there was a few things that were a little different about going there, but as far as the baseball program and the facilities and everything, that was why I ended up there. And as it turned out, he was right.
All right. The class of 2019, Mickey Tettleton. The induction ceremony will be August 12th at the Riverwind Casino in Norman. Appreciate you guys very much sharing your time and support.